The sun had just begun to rise over the dusty blue hues of Jodhpur, Rajasthan. Morning prayers echoed faintly through temple loudspeakers as the townsfolk moved through their daily routines. Shops opened one by one. Livestock were being herded into the fields, and the scent of hot tea drifted through the crisp air. It was a perfect morning, or so it seemed. But hidden behind this beautiful dawn, a storm was silently approaching. A storm that would shatter not just one, but two families. A day that began with excitement and dreams would soon be drenched in blood and unbearable sorrow. Ramesh Patel and his cousin sister Kavita Patel had been waiting for this day all their lives. Born in a humble village named Sar, nestled in the Luni region of Jodhpur district, they belonged to a family that had seen struggle and scarcity, but always believed in the power of education. Ramesh, the eldest son, had been the guiding light for his siblings. His dedication to studies inspired his younger brother Ashok and cousin Kavita to dream big. Kavita was more than a cousin. She was like a sister. Though she was married and lived in Bengaluru with her husband's family, she often returned to her aunt's home for exams and government job preparations. The trio, Ramesh, Ashok, and Kavita, had studied together for years. They had completed their BA together and were pursuing an MA in history. The house echoed with books, aspirations, and shared responsibilities. Kavita's husband was supportive of her ambitions. She was determined, sharp, and filled with a quiet fire. In 2018, Ramesh had married a woman named Goody through an arranged match. The marriage was part of the traditional Attasata custom, where if one family gives a daughter, they receive one in return. So, as Ramesh married Goody, his niece was married to Goody's younger brother. The web of relations deepened and responsibilities multiplied. Despite limited means, Ramesh worked as a security guard to support the family while continuing his studies. In 2020, he cleared a major government exam, VDO, Village Development Officer. Kavita too cleared her exam for the post of Patwari. Both were finally stepping into government service. For a family rooted in poverty, this was no less than reaching for the stars. July 18th, 2022, was supposed to be the first day of Kavita's training. She had traveled from Bengaluru back to her aunt's home on July 13th to collect her documents and prepare for reporting. Excitement filled the house. She would become the first woman from the family to secure a government job. And like always, it was Ramesh who volunteered to drop her off. That Monday morning at 9 a.m., Ramesh and Kavita left their village on his motorbike. They were heading to the Kalabari Patwari Training Center, around 75 kilometers away. The road from Sar village to Luni was quiet, deserted, surrounded by fields and distant hills. What happened next turned this journey of joy into a funeral march. Barely 15 minutes into their ride, and just 2 kilometers from their home, a black SUV came speeding from behind and rammed into them violently. But it didn't stop. The SUV dragged the motorbike for nearly 300 meters, speeding as if determined to crush them completely. Farmers working nearby rushed to the scene. They saw men flee the SUV and scatter into the fields. But one man, the driver, was caught and beaten by the locals before being handed over to the police. Ramesh and Kavita lay on the road, their bodies shattered, blood pooling into the dust, their belongings strewn all around. They were rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Both were declared dead. The dreams, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights of study, all had been crushed under the tires of a ruthless vehicle. At first, the police treated it as a tragic road accident, but witnesses told a different story. Locals had seen the SUV parked nearby minutes before the incident. The men inside were seen eating bananas, acting as though they were waiting for someone. When Ramesh's bike passed by, they had shouted at him, tried to get his attention. And then they followed him, accelerating with precision and purpose. Was this just an accident or a well-planned murder? The villagers were no longer silent. Protests erupted outside the hospital. People demanded justice. Politicians visited, promising action. Ramesh's family filed a murder case under IPC Section 302. The police began a deeper investigation. What they found next would unravel a conspiracy soaked in betrayal and deceit. But before we dive into the twisted web of motives, love affairs, and planned executions, ask yourself this: who would want to kill not just Ramesh, but also Kavita? And why? What dark secret was hiding within their own home? The road had been washed with blood. But the questions lingering in the air were even heavier than the silence in Ramesh and Kavita's home. How could this be an accident when witnesses clearly described a setup? Why did the SUV stop just near the turn days before the incident? Why did the men inside act like they were watching someone? And most importantly, why did they kill both Ramesh and Kavita? The police began digging deeper. The driver caught at the scene was identified as Ramesh Mali. He claimed it was an accident. His brakes had failed. But his version crumbled quickly when villagers reported that this same SUV had been seen circling their village for nearly a month. Multiple times a day, it would drive slowly around the streets as if someone was studying the area. And now, 2 people were dead. But who were the men inside the SUV? The police soon arrested 2 more suspects, Rakesh Suthar and Sohan Patel. All 3 were in their mid-20s. All 3 had connections to the same nearby villages. One more name started to come up: Shankar Patel. He wasn't caught at the scene. He had vanished. But villagers remembered seeing him lurking near the area just a day before the incident. He had suddenly appeared in Luni and then disappeared again. Ramesh's younger brother Ashok, devastated by the deaths, started to connect dots that no one else dared to. He remembered that the night before the murder, on July 17th, he had seen Shankar Patel near their home. During dinner, he told his elder brother about it. Ramesh, quiet and tired, looked at his wife Gudi and said something strange. If anyone wants to leave this house, they can go. No one will stop them. It was almost as if Ramesh knew something was coming, as if the darkness had already crept into his home. Ashok had his doubts, and they were pointing at someone very close, his sister-in-law, Gudi. But why would Gudi want to hurt her own husband and his cousin sister? That's when the entire story took a disturbing turn. Gudi Patel had been married to Ramesh for 3 years. On the surface, it looked like a traditional village marriage, one formed through customs and compromise. But behind the closed doors of the Patel household, things were far from normal. Gudi never liked Ramesh. She'd been forced into the marriage because of the Atasata ritual. When her marriage to Ramesh was fixed, her brother also got engaged to Ramesh's niece. Gudi didn't want to ruin her brother's chances of marriage, so she stayed silent, even though her heart belonged to someone else. She was in love with Shankar Patel. Their affair had begun before her marriage. Even after the wedding, the secret continued to burn. Ramesh, who initially had no clue, began to suspect her. She would spend hours on her phone, chatting and calling someone. Someone saved in her contacts not as Shankar, but as Suman Patel, a woman's name. She had even saved her husband Ramesh's number under the name Wrong Number to avoid suspicion. But suspicion grew into certainty. Ramesh confronted her. He offered her a way out. "If you want to leave, no one will stop you," he said, more than once. But Goody didn't leave. Why? Because if she walked away, her brother's marriage would collapse. His wife, Ramesh's niece, still hadn't completed her gauna, the traditional post-marriage ceremony to begin her married life. If Goody left, her own brother's household would shatter. So she stayed and plotted. She and Shankar began to plan the murder. Ramesh had already survived one mysterious attack a year ago during his night shift as a security guard in Sadri. Back then, a few men had tried to rob him, beat him, but he escaped. No complaint was filed. But now, it seemed like that wasn't a robbery. It was an earlier attempt to eliminate him. This time, they bought a used SUV from Delhi, a black vehicle registered under Rakesh Suthar, financed by someone else. That someone was Shankar Patel. The plan was simple: make the murder look like an accident. What no one expected was that Kavita would be with Ramesh that day. She became collateral damage, perhaps even an intended one. Goody never liked Kavita either. Maybe she was jealous of her intelligence, her independence, her ambition. Maybe she feared Kavita would expose something. Or maybe her only crime was sitting behind Ramesh on that fateful motorbike ride. When Kavita arrived at the house on July 13th for her training, the SUV was seen circling the village again. Plans were already in motion. The gang was just waiting for the right moment. On July 18th, when Ramesh suddenly decided to drive her instead of letting her go by train, Goody had immediately informed Shankar via WhatsApp. It was the moment they were waiting for, and it ended in death. By July 20th, the final rituals of Ramesh and Kavita were held under heavy police security. The village was in mourning, but the whispers had grown louder. Whispers of betrayal, of forbidden love, of a plan that had been in the making for over a year. Police intensified the hunt for Shankar. Tips led them to Gujarat, then to Maharashtra. In the early hours of July 24th, 2022, a raid was conducted at a small home in Nashik. A man with a shaved head and changed clothes was arrested while he slept. He claimed to be Laxman Prajapati, a daily wage worker. But under pressure, he confessed he was Shankar Patel. The conspiracy was now fully exposed. But one question remains. If Goody hated her marriage so much, why didn't she just walk away? Why choose murder over separation? The answers lie in Part 3, where the truth unravels completely, and what's revealed will leave you shocked, angry, and questioning everything about the thin line between love and hate. Are you ready to learn how far a broken heart can go when poisoned with revenge? It was over. The police had arrested all 5 people involved in the horrific murder of Ramesh and Kavita Patel. The conspiracy had been brewing for a year, planned by none other than Ramesh's own wife, Goody Patel, and her lover, Shankar Patel. They had used love as a weapon and silence as their disguise. But the question that haunted everyone now was this: why didn't Goody just leave? Why didn't she walk away from a marriage she hated? Why did she let her obsession pull innocent people like Kavita into the grave? The answer wasn't just about betrayal. It was about a dark corner of human nature. When people refuse to take responsibility for their own choices and instead destroy others to escape their own guilt. After Goody's arrest, the police recovered her phone and dug deep into her call records and WhatsApp chats. What they found painted a terrifying picture. Goody had been in constant touch with Shankar Patel before, during and after the murders. They had exchanged hundreds of messages, including voice notes, location pins, and live updates on Ramesh's movements. The most disturbing part? She had been using the same phone that Ramesh had lovingly gifted her during their wedding. A device meant to connect hearts was being used to orchestrate a murder. And it didn't end there. Goody had saved Shankar's number under a female alias, Suman Patel, to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, she had labeled her own husband's number as wrong number. To her, Ramesh wasn't just an unwanted partner. He had become a mistake, a human being she wanted erased. The motive, according to the police, wasn't just love. It was ego, jealousy, and a twisted form of selfishness. Goody knew that leaving Ramesh would break the Atasata pact her marriage was built on. Her brother's marriage would fall apart. His wife, Ramesh's niece, had still not had her formal Gauna ceremony. If Goody left, her family would suffer shame, and her brother's home would be shattered. So, instead of walking away, she decided to kill. She thought if Ramesh died, she would be free. She could return to her parental home and eventually reunite with Shankar. No questions asked, no social fallout. The murder was her shortcut to freedom. But Kavita, she wasn't meant to die. Or was she? Investigators believe Goody harbored resentment toward Kavita as well. Kavita had always been close to Ramesh. She was smart, focused, and ambitious. Everything Goody wasn't. She had cleared the Patwari exam, was about to begin her job, and was respected by the whole family. Maybe Goody saw in Kavita a threat, not just to her marriage, but to her ego. Kavita reminded Goody of what she could never be. And in a moment of rage, she made sure Kavita would never get the life she deserved. When the truth reached Kavita's parents in Karnataka, they were shattered. Her mother fainted on hearing the news. Her in-laws were in disbelief. Ramesh's family too was broken beyond repair. His younger brother Ashok, once full of dreams, had now lost both his guide and his sister in one cruel blow. And his wife? The woman he loved, the woman he defended before everyone. She was the one who had handed him to death. But how exactly did they pull it off? The SUV used in the murder had been bought a month earlier in Delhi under Rakesh Suthar's name. Shankar had paid for it. The vehicle had been circling the village for weeks, pretending to be just another car on rural roads. Its passengers? Shankar, Rakesh, Sohan, and driver Ramesh Mali, all ready to strike the moment they got the signal. July 18, 2022, was supposed to be a routine day. Ramesh and Kavita were originally going to take a train, but last minute, Kavita insisted on visiting a temple near her in-laws' village. Ramesh agreed. Ashok told them to drop him off after the temple visit and continue their journey by bus. Plans changed. The killers were watching. Goody sent a WhatsApp message. They're going by bike. Within minutes, the SUV changed course and took a position near the Lunisar Road Bridge. When the bike appeared, they drove into it, full speed, never hitting the brakes. Ramesh and Kavita were dragged down the road. If they had survived, they would have been beaten with hockey sticks and baseball bats found inside the vehicle. They had no intention of letting anyone live. But despite all the planning, they couldn't escape. The villagers saw too much. The outrage was too loud. The police acted fast, and soon, one by one, every participant was caught. Even Shankar, who tried to change his name, appearance, and hide in Nashik, was dragged back in chains. All 5 accused eventually confessed. They admitted the hit wasn't random. It was planned, practiced, and executed. It was murder, motivated by forbidden love and the unwillingness to accept reality. Goody had other options. She could have refused the marriage. She could have filed for divorce. She could have walked away. But instead, she chose destruction. And now, the same woman who once wore wedding bangles and posed for photographs next to Ramesh is wearing handcuffs, locked in a cell. The case shocked the entire state. Markets shut down in mourning. Politicians visited the family. Social activists spoke about the dangers of forcing marriages under social customs like atasata, but none of it could bring Ramesh or Kavita back. The irony? Goody got nothing in return. Shankar is in jail. Her brother's marriage is now at risk anyway. Her own future? Gone. A few messages, a few lies, and 2 innocent lives destroyed forever. This wasn't just a murder. It was a reminder, a terrifying one, that when love turns into obsession and silence turns into strategy, even the safest homes can become the deadliest traps. So now we ask you, was this tragedy born out of cultural pressure? Or was it simply the work of selfish hearts? If Goody had spoken up earlier, if Ramesh had pressed harder for divorce, or if someone had simply noticed the tension sooner, could this have been stopped? Or are we all sometimes guilty of ignoring the red flags until it's too late? Let us know in the comments. Was this destiny, culture, or cold-blooded murder? What would you have done if you were in Ramesh's shoes? Let the discussion begin.